2019 was supposed to be the year of folding smartphones. There were three big ones. Of course, everything started with Samsung's Galaxy Fold, which they announced at the latter half of 2018. And when that phone reached reviewers, things just did not go according to plan. Twitter was abuzz with loads of photos of cracked screens. The reviewers didn't know what was happening. Samsung didn't know what was happening. It was just a mess. Samsung had to recall all those phones. It had to halt the launch of the phone. In fact, it had to delay it by 6 months only to minutely tweak it, release it with a bunch of safety precautions. And it was still very expensive. And by the time it kind of released, it wasn't exactly the most cutting edge thing out there. It was a pretty average first attempt. While all of this happened, Huawei also had an ace up its sleeve. They called it the Mate X. It was similar to the Galaxy Fold, but maybe better. It surely definitely had better cameras. And that phone was expected to make a huge splash. But Huawei's plans were ruined by a little guy called Donald Trump. He put Huawei on the American Entity List, which basically meant that Google couldn't supply the Google Play Store for applications to Huawei. All of Huawei phones from 2019 onwards basically didn't have the Play Store, and for most people they were rather useless. And that also meant that that phone never reached India. And last but not the least, in fact, least, was the Motorola Razr. Yes, they reimagined the Razr as a foldable clamshell, a unique form factor as well. But the reason I call it the weakest, the least of all the foldables that came in 2019 were its anemic specs and completely nutty pricing. It had specs that won't do even a 20,000 rupee phone could service. And the cameras were atrocious. And while all of this happened, that screen wasn't exactly amazing, even though the hinge was quite cool. 2019 was a flop show for foldables. But that wasn't going to mean that these smartphone companies were going to abandon the foldable concept. Well, they'd spent over a decade perfecting the technology, particularly Samsung. For a lot of these companies, like Samsung, it kind of had that aura, that vibe of a reset event, just like the original iPhone was to standard mobile phones that were being sold by Nokia in the droves. And we got a glimpse of that future earlier this year when Samsung released the Galaxy Z Flip. It was their take on the Moto Razr style clamshell foldable. And that phone was a huge improvement over the Galaxy Fold. That phone had a redesigned hinge which did not capture so much dust, which made it a little less fragile. More importantly, the screen went from being made out of plastic to actually being glass, which also made it more scratch resistant and yes, less fragile. At the same time, it also had great specs. It had a Snapdragon processor instead of Samsung's Exynos nonsense, decent cameras, and overall, it was also quite affordable compared to some of the other foldables. It wasn't exactly the real deal, but it came with few compromises. It was actually the first real glimpse of the future. But the future is ready now, and it's not the Z Flip, it is the Galaxy Fold 2. Yes, second time is a charm for Samsung. And this phone is basically the most ambitious phone the South Korean company has ever made. It's really important considering the first Fold was a bit of a disaster. This is also cheaper, starting at, well, I won't say just, but 1,50,000 rupees. But they have improved every aspect of the folding phone concept that they pioneered and kind of flattered to deceive with, because this does not. Indeed, the future is here now, and unfortunately, it's happening in 2020, the year of the pandemic. Well, as you may imagine, this phone is all about the screen. Just not one screen, but actually two screens. This obviously is the main star of the show. You still see the crease. It's quite dramatic, but if you ignore that, then this is quite gorgeous. It's 7.6 inches. It only gets this tiny, minute hole punch notch for the selfie camera, which is really great. That ungainly notch that they had with multiple cameras out here on the original Fold is gone now. So that's really, really nice. By the way, this is also an 120 Hz display. I don't know how Samsung did it, but they have done it and it looks brilliant. The screen pops, it's fluid, it's got great colors, it's got everything that you will want. And it has one thing that no other screen has, it can do this. Yeah, it folds. So Samsung has really done a great job and the screen is just absolutely fantastic. But they've also done a great job on the screen out here on the back, which is also now very useful. This is now full vertically aligned. It's giving you a full real estate. It's full edge to edge. It's 6.2 inches. A little narrow, actually quite narrow, and kind of makes this phone feel like a old school Nokia communicator in a way. But again, this is a fantastic screen. This screen though is made out of plastic. It's not made out of glass. And again, this also gets a hole punch notch for a selfie camera. So you've got two selfie cameras out here. It's a great screen again. Very useful for doing one-handed thingies. Like if I want to just make a phone call, I can do this, right? It's really nice. If I want to send messages, SMSs quickly, I can just do everything with one hand as long as it's reachable. I can't really go on top, but the UI is optimized in such a way that everything will be available in this bottom quadrant where I can sort of get my thumbs to work for me. The other thing is if you just lay this phone flat, then it's just 6.9 mm. So it's amongst the thinnest phones in the world if you think of it like this. Of course, it becomes a bit of a beast, hulking beast like this. You can basically 2x 6.9 mm and you can do the math on that. The other advantage of this form factor is that they are using a side-mounted fingerprint scanner which is there in the power button. Again, it's very convenient. It's definitely better than the ultrasonic fingerprint scanner that's there on the Galaxy S20 and the Galaxy Note 20. The real big advantage of this screen obviously is multitasking. Samsung has done a ton of optimization. They've built the user interface in such a way that you can have a bunch of apps open at the same time. So for instance, if I want this Google app to just slide in out here, it'll just come here and it'll come in full screen. Certain apps need to be optimized for that. But say for example, I have YouTube out here coming in and I can sort of just host this on the side and boom. But I can go one step beyond and now also add my messaging app out here and it will take over half of the screen and maybe add one more app like Chrome. See, I've got 3 apps running at the same time. And performance wise, I'm not seeing a lot of problems. And the reason for that is even though we are here in India, this is the India unit, Samsung has made all of my wishes come true. This one is powered by the Qualcomm Snapdragon 865 coupled with 12 GB of DDR RAM. And this chip allows this big canvas to be leveraged properly. Of course, Android is not fully optimized right now for this, so the support is kind of limited, but I am going to assume that this is going to improve consistently as we see more and more foldables. Microsoft apps, for instance, some of those apps work really nicely in this foldable form factor. That's where I really find this phone to be great, actually game-changing. Another way that I love using this phone is how to browse the web. Say for example, one of my favorite websites, and I'm sure it's your favorite website too, is The Verge. And if I go to The Verge, I get this view of The Verge. Yes, this is a full desktop view. It's almost like viewing this on paper. It's square. I get all the view of all the content and I can browse it easily. It feels so much more intuitive, more physically enchanting and really usable. Then, of course, you guys know that I'm a writer. I'll be writing a lot of stuff, sometimes even for car and bike. This phone allows me to get my writing on point. Why? Because I'll open an app like Google Docs, even though it's not fully optimized yet for this form factor, I get the advantages of this huge screen. So here I'm using Microsoft Swift Key keyboard, which I have kind of configured according to my workflow, so I can do two-handed typing very easily. But I can also do this and have certain apps run like this, almost like the Nokia communicator of yesteryear. But if you use Samsung's default keyboard, then it kind of splits up the keyboard on two sides, almost like the way you can get the thumb keyboard for the iPad. So that also helps with typing a lot, and it makes things really ergonomic. And the typing experience is actually really good because the haptic feedback on this phone is just about the best in the business. Samsung does the best haptic feedback on Android, and this phone also gets it, which makes the experience even nicer. So you can do a lot with this screen, and for a productivity fiend, this is just not going to be a party trick. It's going to really help you to get work done on the go more efficiently and more easily. And that's why this kind of represents like a reset moment. Right now, we can't even fathom the type of new use cases that developers will create. But definitely this extra screen real estate, this dynamism of these dual screen, and also the fact that you can literally go from this screen to the back screen in one go like this makes things really simple. And that's the amazing bit of the Galaxy Fold 2. I folded it, but I'm focusing on the cameras here. Yeah, you see 3 cameras out here, but overall there are 5 cameras on this phone. So you get one selfie camera out here, it's a 10 megapixel shooter. You get another one out here, which is also a 10 megapixel shooter. And you get 3 12 megapixel cameras out here. So Samsung is not using its 108 MP hulking beastly sensor out here, which it has touted on the Galaxy S20 Ultra and the Note 20 Ultra. It does crazy things like 100x space zoom. But as we have found out in most of our reviews, it's not exactly the best camera out there, at least the way Samsung is using it. That camera has had autofocusing issues, the color tonality is also not exactly great. And that kind of leads me to the camera system on this phone. Now, I'm going to say something very outlandish out here. These 3 cameras represent the best Samsung cameras I've seen on a smartphone. And I'm going to elaborate why. Even though these are not the best sensors that Samsung has ever put on their phones, but all 3 of them have got a 12 megapixel resolution, which is a proven fact that this resolution is the optimal resolution. Even with the 108 megapixel resolution camera, Samsung was oversampling those photos and outputting them at 12 megapixel resolution. So might as well just have a 12 megapixel resolution sensor. Takes great videos, great 4K video at 60 frames per second. Amongst the best that you can get on a modern smartphone outside of an iPhone. But this sensor works really well. These 3 sensors work really well in all kinds of situations. You get a really nice ultra-wide camera for landscape shots. You get a very decent telephoto camera. So you can do a bit of zooming, but not crazy levels of zoom. And at the same time, the main camera itself is really meaty. And when it's supported with the Snapdragon processor's ISP, then you are getting almost pixel-like photos. Yeah, I mean Google Pixel-like photos. And that's the real deal about this phone. The photos, particularly in low light, are gorgeous. And it's more fun to shoot with this phone. Why? Because you can either have this huge viewfinder, which is massive by any metric, like this. It's massive. See, my face looks huge on this. Then you also get this very unique tent mode kind of thingy happening, where I can use the camera like this, where this is going to be great for group photos or something like that. And this mode can also be further utilized for selfies. So if I want to take selfies with Cecil out here, can do that. Yeah, exactly. And at the same time, there are 2 really good selfie cameras in the case you don't want to do all of this jazz. And the low light photography particularly, I can't overemphasize that the night mode is highly improved. I think the Snapdragon processor is doing a little more heavy lifting on this. That's why you're getting better colors, more vivid colors, but they still maintain a sense of realism, unlike the oversaturation that Samsung's phones are known for. And overall, great photos come out of this phone. No compromises on the camera, unlike some of the other flagship phones that Samsung has released this year. Now you get this massive 7.6-inch screen out here, this one. And at the same time you get a 6.2-inch screen. But you still just get a 4500 mAh battery, which can do a fast charge at 25 watts with a supplied charger. It also does wireless charging. Yep, it charges. Now, what I've experienced with this phone is the battery life is pretty decent. It's not game changing, but it is decent. For most people, it's going to last a day, even if you're typing a lot of text on this big wide screen. Samsung's battery management is pretty intelligent, and the Snapdragon processor built on the 7nm process is also quite efficient. So the end result is the battery life is not going to be a problem for most people, but at the same time, this is no Samsung M51 with a 7000 mAh battery that doesn't need to be charged for 3 days. This is just not that phone. As much as I wish this phone had a slightly bigger battery, it's still not a deal breaker, which is the good news out here, because at the end of the day, everything is about balance. If they would have increased the size of the battery, then this phone would have become a little more ungainly, and it's already quite a large phone. It weighs 282 grams and it's around 14 millimeters when you sort of put it up like a sandwich. So they really couldn't extend the battery much here. They did not have enough space. But with the limitations they were working with, they came up with a pretty good solution, which is delivering a day-long worth of battery life with around 7 hours of screen on time. It's going to last you around 13 hours on a single charge, and it supports fast charging and wireless charging and reverse wireless charging. So pretty much it has everything. Now, the biggest concern with the Galaxy Fold was build quality. Well, the build quality has definitely gone up a notch. Pun not intended. Well, you are seeing a design very similar to the Galaxy Note 20 Ultra, which we reviewed recently. So you are getting that same satin-like finish out here. This is a glass back, but it feels so supple. Almost again like that Louis Vuitton phone. Yes. That's what I call the Galaxy Note 20 Ultra, and that's what this phone feels like. It's just that you have got an additional screen out here built out of plastic, which is obviously a little more fragile. This phone obviously does not have any water or dust resistance, which makes it a little more fragile, and these folding screens, they do not have Gorilla Glass, so they are going to be prone to more damage and you can't manhandle them. But at the same time, I can do this and not really worry about it. I can keep it in my pocket have some keys out there as well, and not really worry about this phone's screen getting cracked while it's in your... Sure, you can't keep this on your back pocket and sit down on it, because that's not going to be good for the screen. But overall, the build quality is definitely a step up. It's not perfect, but still it's pretty nice. Then you get these dual speakers, which are super loud, super clear, amongst the best that I've seen on a smartphone. That's adding to the multimedia narrative of this phone. The screen also supports HDR10, which means Netflix shows are going to look pretty nice, YouTube is going to look gorgeous, and generally watching content on this phone is going to be a fun experience. And if you're going to be going in the metro, even though I don't advise it thanks to COVID, people are going to ask you, "Bhai, kaun sa phone hai?" That's going to happen, seriously. And that's the cool thing about it. Now the problem with the Galaxy Fold 2 is that it costs 1,50,000 rupees. This is cutting edge, bleeding edge technology. Samsung has actually done really well to reduce the price by another good 15,000 rupees. But still, in the middle of a pandemic, I cannot recommend anyone to spend 1,50,000 rupees on a phone. But still, you're getting a lot of phone out here. You get 256 GB of storage. You're getting 12 GB RAM. So these are like top tier specs. These are high-end SKUs generally, even if you're looking at a phone like a Galaxy Note 20. So those phones are also going to come close to this phone's price if you're going to choose those SKUs. And then you get the convenience of this great screen. You get this additional second screen, which is also very useful. And you get the best camera system and a superior processor than Samsung's so-called flagship phones, which are the Galaxy S20 Ultra and the Note 20 Ultra. In fact, these cameras, the performance, everything is just up there with phones like the OnePlus 8 Pro or the Xiaomi Mi 10. It is that good. And you get this. And I can't get over it. Once you use the Fold, you're always going to be using a Fold.